Hi, everyone. It's Paige. Today, we'll be talking about the South Korea-US summit held on August 25th, 2025, at the White House in Washington, D.C. This was the first meeting between South Korean President Lee Jae-myung and U.S. President Donald Trump. There were concerns ahead of the summit due to sensitive issues such as tariffs and the presence of U.S. forces in South Korea. These concerns intensified after President Trump posted a message on Truth Social on the morning of the summit. The post contained provocative terms such as purge and revolution, and the summit was delayed beyond its scheduled time due to the subsequent executive order signing ceremony and press Q&A. This led to speculation in diplomatic circles that the summit could go off the rails, similar to what happened with Ukraine's President Zelensky or South Africa's Cyril Ramaphosa in the past. Fortunately, the actual summit unfolded in a much more amicable and constructive atmosphere than expected. The meeting officially began at 12:32 p.m. local time and lasted approximately 2 hours and 20 minutes. The summit kicked off with President Lee offering praise to Trump. He highlighted Trump's achievements, particularly regarding his previous diplomacy with North Korea. Lee even said, "Build Trump world in North Korea so I can play golf there." He emphasized that improving inter-Korean relations would be difficult without U.S. involvement and that Trump was uniquely positioned to play the role of a peacemaker. Lee said that if Trump could lead the peace effort, he would act as a pacemaker to support him. In response, Trump stressed his personal connection with Kim Jong-un and expressed willingness to meet him again. Regarding the APEC summit scheduled for October 31st in Jeonju, South Korea, Trump said, "I'd love to," when asked about the possibility of attending. As for the possibility of facilitating a meeting between President Lee and Kim Jong-un, he said, "That'd be interesting." The summit also touched on tariff negotiations and cooperation in shipbuilding. President Lee noted that the U.S. is experiencing a renaissance in manufacturing and shipbuilding and expressed hope that South Korea could be a part of this growth. The next day, Lee visited the Philly shipyard in Pennsylvania, which had recently been acquired by South Korea's Hanwha Ocean. Trump reflected on how the U.S. used to build a ship a day during World War II but now struggles, and suggested that Korean shipbuilders could work with American labor in the U.S. This suggests a dual production strategy, securing orders in Korea while building ships in the U.S. Security issues were another key focus of the summit. One major topic was the modernization of the ROK U.S. alliance. President Lee officially announced plans to increase South Korea's defense budget. Given his earlier remarks that pursuing strategic flexibility may not be feasible under current circumstances, this seemed to be a compromise Korea could accept. However, no specific target figure for the increased budget has been set, which could lead to future disputes. President Trump also pushed for more purchases of U.S. weapons and energy. South Korea is already buying U.S. weapons, with a significant portion of its defense improvement budget allocated for this. But with Trump's additional demands, the scale of future purchases may grow. In terms of energy, South Korea had already agreed in a prior deal to buy $100 billion worth of U.S. LNG and other products. Whether this volume will increase remains to be seen. When asked about the potential reduction of U.S. forces in Korea, Trump said, "I don't want to talk about that right now," avoiding a direct answer. Instead, he brought up the issue of U.S.-based property ownership. Trump suggested eliminating the current lease agreements and demanded ownership of the land itself. However, under the SOFA agreement, Korea provides these facilities via grants, not leases, meaning the U.S. has usage rights but not ownership. Many observers believe Trump raised this point not to act on it, but to use it as a future bargaining chip. The two leaders also reaffirmed the 15% tariff agreement concluded on July 30th, 2025. This is seen as a key achievement, giving Korean companies a more stable foothold in the U.S. market. Another major outcome was the investment pledge from South Korean companies. Accompanying President Lee, top executives from major Korean firms committed to investing about $150 billion in the U.S. This investment will target sectors like AI, semiconductors, biotechnology, shipbuilding, and nuclear energy. Since the CEOs themselves were present, the pledge carries weight as a concrete action rather than just a diplomatic statement. Right after the summit, President Lee also went to separate meeting with these business leaders to reinforce the message of U.S. Korea economic cooperation. Despite the pre-summit tension, the meeting is being evaluated as a successful diplomatic icebreaker. Lee actively praised Trump, creating a friendly atmosphere, and Trump reciprocated by calling him a great leader in a handwritten message afterward. There was even a rare protocol moment where Trump personally pulled out Lee's chair, an unusual gesture in diplomatic settings. Chief of Staff Kang Hoon-sik's participation in the official talks drew attention outside the meeting room. It's highly common for the Chief of Staff to stay in the country when the president is out of the country. However, Kang was in Washington to meet Trump's top aide, Susie Wiles, known as the Ice Princess, to clarify misunderstandings stemming from Korea's political turmoil after the December 3, 2024 martial law event. Kang reportedly explained Korea's efforts to restore democracy through proper procedures and clear up misinformation being circulated in the U.S. This process is related to the message Trump wrote before the summit. One of the biggest concerns leading up to the summit was President Trump's earlier message, a message that stirred quite a bit of speculation. However, during the press conference, a reporter's question helped clear things up. When asked about the background behind his message, President Trump explained that he had heard some troubling reports coming out of South Korea. He said it was hard to believe that such things could actually be happening in the Republic of Korea. Then, President Trump gave President Lee Jae-myung the opportunity to respond. President Lee calmly corrected the misinformation and clarified the facts. In response, President Trump acknowledged that it was all a misunderstanding, just a simple mix-up, and the issue was quickly put to rest. As for presidential gifts, President Lee brought personalized items for Trump, a golf club, a turtle ship model, and a MAGA hat. There was also an unexpected gift, a pen. Trump noticed the pen Lee used to sign the White House guest book and asked, "Did you bring that yourself? Are you taking it back?" Lee responded by gifting the pen, saying it might help with Trump's tough signatures. Trump replied that he wouldn't use it, but would cherish it as an honorable gift. So, how did the international community react? Korean media highlighted the pre-summit tension caused by Trump's social media post, but noted the surprisingly warm tone of the actual meeting. Since this was President Lee's first U.S. summit, analysts believe it helped establish a positive image of him in the U.S. However, some outlets pointed out the absence of a joint statement, suggesting unresolved differences remain. In the U.S., both liberal and conservative media offered favorable coverage. The Washington Post described the meeting as one of mutual respect and cooperation, contrary to initial concerns. Axios focused on the North Korea remarks, noting that Trump may again play a key role in future peace talks. The conservative Financial Times reported that the summit focused on military, trade, and North Korea issues and said that President Lee's pro-China image didn't cause significant friction. Meanwhile, the Chinese government has yet to release an official statement regarding the recent Korea-U.S. summit. The Global Times, an English-language newspaper affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party's People's Daily, offered critical commentary on South Korean President Lee Jae-myung's remarks. Following the summit, President Lee stated during the Korea-U.S. Strategic Economic Dialogue (SISC) that it would no longer be feasible for South Korea to pursue the so-called security with the U.S. and economy with China, 한미정상회담, strategy as it had in the past. In response, the Global Times criticized this position, claiming it ignores fundamental questions about the geopolitical situation on the Korean Peninsula and in Northeast Asia. It further argued that such a stance could ultimately lead to South Korea's national interests becoming subordinate to the United States' global strategy. Also emphasized that, as a close neighbor of South Korea and a stakeholder in the shared goal of regional peace and stability, the future direction of Korea's policy decisions will be of significant importance. This summit can be summed up in two major takeaways. First, it laid a solid foundation for economic cooperation through real investment pledges. Second, it revived Trump's relevance in North Korea-related diplomacy. Of course, there are clear limitations. No joint statement or written agreement was produced. Sensitive topics like reduction of U.S. forces in Korea weren't addressed in depth. And Trump's unpredictability remains a major variable. In conclusion, the August 25th, 2025 summit between South Korea and the United States began under tension, but ended on a surprisingly warm note. President Lee successfully broke the ice with praise and goodwill, and Trump responded with a personal compliment, calling him a great leader. While there were meaningful discussions on the economy, North Korea, and alliance modernization, the lack of a joint statement remains a lingering disappointment. Looking ahead, it will be important to watch whether a direct U.S. North Korea dialogue emerges at the upcoming APEC summit, and how this summit will shape the long-term trajectory of the U.S. Korea alliance. Thank you for listening.